My name is Grace Holloway, and for most of my life, I was the kind of woman people barely noticed, but always expected to be there. I was the one who packed the school lunches before dawn, folded the laundry before anyone asked, and remembered birthdays without needing a calendar. I raised 3 children, buried a husband, and helped raise 2 grandchildren, all while keeping a home that never quite felt like mine. There's a certain rhythm you fall into when you live for other people. It starts small. One day you give up your art class to drive someone to practice, and before long, your dreams are packed away in a box marked maybe later. I wasn't bitter about it. At least not then. I believed love looked like sacrifice, and I wore mine like a quiet badge of honor. I made holidays feel like magic. I cooked meals that brought silence to the table, the kind only good food can create. I stayed behind when everyone else moved forward, thinking that was just what good mothers did. For years, I was the glue, the phone call at midnight, the emergency babysitter, the one who knew everyone's allergies, schedules, and preferences better than they did. But somewhere along the line, that knowing turned into invisibility. I stopped being Grace. I became grandma, mum, the background. I'd sit in rooms full of family and feel like furniture present, but not seen. I didn't resent them, not at first. I told myself this was just the way of things. You raise children to grow up, to move on, to need you less. But what I never expected was that needing less would turn into noticing less. They stopped asking how I was. They assumed I was fine because I always had been. They'd walk past the garden I spent hours in, never seeing the care in every bloom. And slowly I began to shrink inside myself. I found comfort in silence, because it meant no one was asking for more. But that silence grew heavy, like a coat I couldn't take off. I started journaling late at night, not out of nostalgia, but survival. I needed proof that I still existed outside of grocery lists and casserole recipes, that somewhere beneath the routine, Grace was still there. I watched birthdays come and go with fewer calls. I watched my name fade from Christmas cards replaced by group signatures, and I convinced myself it didn't hurt. But it did, quietly in ways I couldn't quite name, like when my granddaughter posted a family photo online and I was cropped out not out of malice, but convenience. You start to wonder if maybe you did something wrong, if loving too much, giving too much, meant you taught them you were optional. I wasn't always invisible. I used to be a girl with paint on her fingers and fire in her chest. I used to laugh so loud it embarrassed my siblings. Somewhere along the way, I traded that in for being dependable. And maybe that was the real cost of being good. You give and give until there's nothing left to take, and then they stop looking because they think they've already seen everything you are. But they haven't. Not even close. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind that smelled like rain but never delivered. I was sitting at the kitchen table sorting through RSVP cards for Harper's bridal shower. The sun poured in softly and warmly, and for a moment it felt like peace. My phone buzzed once, then again, with that soft trill I'd set for family group messages. I tapped the screen without thinking, expecting maybe a photo of the cake or a question about the guest list. Instead, what I saw pulled the breath right out of me. The thread was already in progress. I must have been added by accident. My name wasn't tagged, but I was there, right there, reading every word, like a stranger eavesdropping in her own home. Can we make sure Grandma doesn't wear one of her Walmart floral tops? This vibe is modern chic, not nursing home. Then came the laugh reactions. Then Harper. I love her, I do, but she's not really on brand. Maybe tell her we're keeping it small, just bridesmaids and friends. I stared at the screen so long that the letters blurred. I read it again, slower this time, as if the meaning might change. But it didn't. I was the joke, the aesthetic mistake, the one who needed to be managed. Something in me went still. Not angry, not even hurt yet, just quiet like snow falling in a place that used to feel like spring. I didn't cry, not right away. Instead, I read the messages again, tracing every word with a kind of detached curiosity. There was no venom in them, That was the worst part. It wasn't a cruel attack. It was casual, effortless, like I'd always been someone to work around. I'd spent months planning her shower. Harper wanted a garden party theme, so I found a venue with ivy-covered walls and rented vintage tea sets. I'd ordered monogrammed napkins and tiny honey jars with her initials tied in ribbon. I used money I'd saved from years of skipping new clothes and hair appointments. I did it because I loved her, because that's what I thought family meant. You give without expecting credit. You show up. You stay late to clean up. You send thank you cards, even when no one thanks you first. But apparently, somewhere along the way, I became a burden to manage, an accessory no one wanted in the photo. I put the phone down and stared at the kitchen wall. There was a water stain I hadn't noticed before, a soft brown bloom just above the sink. I kept looking at it as if it could explain something, anything. The kettle whistled. I hadn't realized I'd turned it on. I got up slowly, poured the water, and sat back down. My hands were shaking just enough to ripple the surface of the tea. It was the first time in a long time I felt truly alone. Not the quiet solitude I was used to, but a colder version. The kind where even your name, spoken by your own blood, sounds like something foreign. I picked up the phone again, typed 3 words into the group chat. Hope it's beautiful. Then I muted the thread. No one replied. Maybe they didn't know what to say. Maybe they didn't even notice I'd seen it. I sat there for a long time sipping tea that had gone lukewarm. The house was too quiet. Even the clock seemed to tick more softly, like it didn't want to disturb whatever was unraveling. I wanted to scream, to confront, to ask why. But there was no fight in me just yet, just the deep ache of being left out of something you helped build. I thought of Harper as a little girl falling asleep in my lap while I read her stories. I thought of the time she broke her arm in 3rd grade and only wanted Grandma at the hospital. I thought of every moment I showed up, every sacrifice I made, every bit of love I poured into her. And now I was too much, too out of touch, too visible in a way that made them uncomfortable. I didn't throw my phone or curse the world. I just folded the message into a quiet part of me, the part that already knew how to carry disappointment. And then I cleaned the teacup, wiped the table, and went on with my day. Because that's what women like me do. We absorb, we endure, and then we get very, very still. Until one day, stillness isn't enough. And something inside starts to stir. The morning after reading that text, I woke up before the sun, as I always did. The house was still the only sound, the creak of floorboards under my slippers. I stood at the kitchen window with my cup of coffee and watched the light shift across the lawn, thinking about all the moments I'd swallowed my pride in that same silence. There was a number scribbled on a sticky note by the phone, the contact for the venue Harper wanted so badly. The one I'd put a deposit on 3 months ago after comparing flour availability and counting every saved-up dollar twice. I stared at it while my coffee went cold, then picked up the receiver and dialed. When the woman answered, I told her my name and the reservation date. My voice didn't shake. She asked if I wanted to reschedule. I said no. She offered to waive the cancellation fee. I told her not to worry. I had other plans for the money. I hung up and stood in the quiet, feeling the strangest sense of calm settle over me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad anymore. I was something else entirely. Still, steady, awake. That afternoon, I packed the little boxes of party favors, lavender sachets, and ribbon-tied thank you cards into a bin and taped it shut. I wrote donation on the side in black marker and set it by the door. I opened my laptop and transferred the full refund from the event planner into my savings, then moved it again straight into the account I use for charitable giving. I sent the entire amount to a non-profit in town that supports single mothers starting over. Women I'd volunteered with years ago. Women who knew what it meant to be disregarded, labeled, and minimized. I wrote a note to go with the donation, in honor of women who are never too much and never too basic. I signed it simply, Grace H. I didn't tell a soul. No post, no call, no dramatic announcement. Just a quiet undoing of what had been taken for granted. That night, I slept better than I had in months. Not because anything had been fixed, but because for the first time in a long while, I had chosen myself. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. For years, I'd believed love meant endurance, that family meant forgiving slights big and small without asking for an apology or change. But that message thread had shown me something else. That silence had turned me into a shadow. That kindness without boundaries becomes something else entirely. It becomes erasure. I didn't cancel the shower to hurt Harper. I cancelled it because I refused to fund my own dismissal. I refused to keep playing a role in a celebration that didn't want me in the picture. The day of the shower, I didn't cry. I didn't watch the clock or wonder if they noticed. I made myself a glass of iced tea, sat on the porch, and listened to the birds. The world didn't end. The earth didn't shift. But inside me, something moved. For the first time, I understood what power really felt like. Not loud, not sharp, just complete, like something settling into place. I thought about all the times I had said yes out of obligation, all the favors, the late-night drives, the holidays where I was the last to sit, the first to clean. I thought about how no one noticed when I stopped putting out the welcome mat, how no one asked why I wasn't smiling in the photos anymore. And I realized I wasn't disappearing. I was being erased, polished out of the picture by convenience. And I had let it happen. Not anymore. I started a journal that week, not just of what happened with Harper, but everything. The years, the moments, the quiet heartbreaks that never made noise. I needed to see them all in one place, not to dwell, to name them, to name me. I wrote about the time I went back to work after raising kids and was called brave, though no one offered help. About the Christmas I spent alone when no one could fit me into their schedule. About the surgery I had where no one came until I'd already healed. Those memories used to hurt. Now they felt like fuel, evidence, proof that I had survived more than they knew. The truth is, I didn't feel vindictive. I didn't even want an apology. I wanted freedom, and I'd found it. In the quiet, in the choice, in the beautiful stillness of finally drawing a line. That's the thing no one tells you, that sometimes peace looks like walking away from the table you once set, letting them eat without you, letting them wonder. Because while they scrambled to salvage an event I no longer supported, I was already onto something else, something bigger, something mine. The night of the dinner, the room was dressed in warm light and polite conversation. I sat at the head of the long table, hands folded in my lap, heart steady, but beating hard. Lily had set it up perfectly, a documentary tribute to the matriarch of the Holloway family, or so everyone thought. They came dressed to impress. My daughter June floated in with that tight-lipped smile she wore when cameras were around. Harper followed close behind, polished and poised, greeting everyone with the ease of someone used to being adored. They all thought the evening was about them. A little legacy piece, something glossy to post about. But I hadn't planned it for their comfort. I planned it for the truth. We made it through salad and small talk. Laughter bubbled up now and then, but I heard it for what it was. Nervous, surface level, a performance. When Lily gave me the nod from behind her camera, I stood up. The room quieted like someone had turned down the volume. I took a breath and began. I thanked them for coming, told them how much this moment meant to me. Then I looked around the table and said, "For years, I played a part in this family I never auditioned for. I was the helper, the extra, the one who remembered everyone's favorite pie and showed up early to set the table. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being seen. No one moved. Even forks froze mid-air. I turned to Harper. You know I planned your bridal shower down to the last detail. I booked the venue, paid the deposit, and even picked favors you'd actually use. And then I saw the message. The one where I was too much, too old, too off-brand for your perfect little party." She blinked, cheeks flushing. I could see her trying to form a response, but I didn't give her room. I cancelled the shower. Not to be petty. To be clear. I was funding something I wasn't welcome at. That ends with me. June reached for her wine glass, her hand trembling just enough to notice. I wasn't done. I kept going. About the birthdays missed. The surgeries were endured alone. The way they cropped me out of their lives and didn't think I'd notice. You all made me invisible, I said. And for a long time I let you. But not anymore. Silence stretched thick across the table. No one looked at each other. No one looked at me. Then slowly Harper spoke. Her voice was small. I didn't mean for you to see that. I nodded. I know. That was the problem. I sat back down. My hands were still shaking, but my spine felt straight for the first time in years. I had said it. All of it. Lily turned off the camera. No one clapped. No one toasted. They sat with it. Let it settle. And I did too. Not with anger, but with something far better. Peace. The kind you earn when you finally stop asking for space and take it instead. A few days after the dinner, Lily came back from a trip to the county archives with a thin folder tucked under her arm and something electric in her eyes. She laid it on the table without saying a word, just pushed it toward me with both hands. My name was typed across the top of a letter I hadn't seen in over 30 years. It was from my mother, dated 3 months before she passed. In it she stated clearly and without hesitation that the family farm, the place where I was born, where I raised my kids, where I cooked holiday meals for people who stopped showing up, was mine. She wrote that it was always meant to be mine, that I had been the one who stayed, who sacrificed. I remembered the letter. I had found it after her funeral tucked in her worn Bible. I had shown it to Charles, my ex-husband, thinking he would pass it to the lawyer. He said it wouldn't hold up in court, said it wasn't legally binding, said I shouldn't cause problems. But he had lied. He hadn't just dismissed it. He had buried it. Quietly. Completely. And with it my rightful place in the legacy of that land. My hands trembled as I reread her words. I felt like I was touching her voice. And I felt the betrayal fresh and sharp. Not just from him, but from every silence that followed. Every year I stood on that soil, thinking it no longer belonged to me. Lily had done her research. The letter, combined with the original will and a few court filings she unearthed, gave us a case. A strong one. I stood up from the table without saying a word. My chair scraped the floor like thunder in the quiet kitchen. Then I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Call the lawyer. Let's bring this all into the light." That was the moment I stopped being someone who got left out of the picture. I was stepping back into the frame, not to ask for justice, to claim what was always mine, and I was ready to fight for it. Spring arrived like a soft exhale, the kind of warmth that makes you open your windows just to let the air settle on your skin. I spent most mornings out on the porch of the farmhouse, watching light stretch across fields that had felt forgotten for too long. There was a sense of return in every corner. Weeds were pulled, shutters painted, and boards hammered back into place. I didn't rush it. Healing like repair needs time and hands that mean it. Lily was there most days, camera in one hand, coffee in the other. She asked questions gently, never digging, just guiding. I told her stories as I pulled vines from fences or repainted the mailbox Mama used to check at dawn. Then one afternoon, Harper came. I saw her car before I saw her. She parked halfway down the gravel road like she needed the walk to prepare herself. She wore jeans, no makeup, and hair pulled into a loose knot. She looked young, not just in age, but in vulnerability. She stood on the porch steps like she didn't know if she'd be welcomed. I opened the door anyway. She handed me a small gift. Inside was a printed copy of that group chat, the one I'd never meant to see. But she'd framed it. Around the words, she had written something in pen. I was wrong. You're not basic. You're the foundation. My throat caught. I didn't say much, just pulled her into a hug. She cried against my shoulder the way she had as a child, when her world was too loud and Grandma always knew what to do. She stayed for 3 days, helped me trim the bushes, cooked dinner, asked questions that mattered. I told her everything, not to shame, to share. She listened like someone who finally understood the cost of silence. On the last night, she looked out across the field and said, "Maybe I don't want the big wedding anymore. Maybe I want something real. And I knew exactly what she meant. We planned it quietly, a simple ceremony behind the barn where the light hit just right near sunset. Folding chairs, wildflowers in jars. The oak tree was wrapped in silk ribbon from Mama's old drawer. Neighbours brought pies, friends strung up lights. Lily filmed it all, but only when asked. Harper walked barefoot down a grassy aisle, her fiancé waiting under a wooden arch we built together. She held daisies instead of roses. Red vows she wrote in a notebook, still smudged with dirt from helping me in the garden. And when she spoke, she said my name. Not Grandma, not Grace. She said Grace Holloway taught me that love isn't about image, it's about showing up. Again and again. I don't remember crying, but I must have. Because when it ended, my cheeks were wet and my hands were steady. After the vows, she turned to me. Will you stand with us for a photo? This time, no one cropped me out. That night, as the stars came out and music floated through the air, I sat on the porch and watched Harper laugh like a girl with her whole life ahead of her. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel old. I felt rooted, like the soil under my feet had waited for this day just as long as I had. There was healing in every detail. Not perfect, not dramatic, just real. The kind that lingers in your chest when the world slows down and says, yes. This is what home feels like. The idea came quietly, like most sacred things do. One afternoon, Harper and I were sitting under the oak tree, sipping sweet tea and watching the breeze roll through the fields. She looked up at the branches at the ribbon we had left there after her wedding and said, maybe other women need a place like this too. At first it was just a name. The Ribbon House. A whisper of a thought. A space we could offer to women who'd spent too long holding in their stories. But the more we spoke it aloud, the more real it became. We cleared out the guest rooms, washed old quilts, painted walls with soft colours that reminded me of sunrise. Women started arriving not all at once, but slowly. Some came with duffel bags and tear-streaked faces. Others came in silence, unsure if they even belonged. Each woman who arrived was given a ribbon, not as a gift, but as a declaration. A soft strip of fabric where she wrote her name, tied it to the tree, and left a little weight behind. Angela, who left a man who convinced her she was unlovable. Margot, who learned to drive at 73. Jenny, whose own mother shut the door when she spoke her truth. Their stories weren't loud, but they carried strength like roots beneath the ground. The tree bloomed in colour, red for courage, blue for hope, yellow for the day they finally said no. Each ribbon caught the wind, and with it their voices finally moved through the world. Lily documented everything, not just for the film, but to remember, to witness. She sat with them in the kitchen. She walked with them through the fields. She let their silence speak and their words rise. We didn't promise to fix them. We promised to see them, to welcome them with tea and casseroles and a front porch that didn't judge the weight of their past. And they came, from across the state, then across the country. Each one brings something broken. Each one leaves something whole. The Ribbon House wasn't about charity. It was about dignity, about handing the mic to women who had been talked over for too long. And every time I stood beneath that oak tree with ribbons brushing my shoulders like blessings, I remembered why we built it. Not to be loud, not to be famous, just to say you belong. And sometimes that's all a woman needs to begin again. The day of the dedication ceremony, the lawn was filled with chairs, white ribbons tied to every one. Faces from across the county, from across the years, filled those seats. Women I'd known forever, women I'd only met once, and those who had stayed long enough to plant a piece of themselves into this place. I stood at the front, just under the arch of the oak tree, the breeze tugging gently at my dress. Lily held the camera steady. Harper sat in the front row, her hands resting over her rounded belly, new life on the way. I cleared my throat, let the silence gather around me like a warm shawl. Then I began. For most of my life, I believed love looked like quiet sacrifice, like letting others shine while you carried the weight behind the scenes. I thought being useful meant being silent, that the most honorable kind of woman was the one who never asked for more. But over the years, I learned something different. That silence doesn't mean strength, that sacrifice without recognition becomes erasure, and that no one gets to decide your worth but you. I looked out at the crowd, the women who had once whispered their truths behind closed doors now nodding openly. I took a breath. I wasn't a burden. I was the blessing no one saw. A hush fell then, not from discomfort, but from recognition. That sentence landed in hearts like a stone in water rippling through places no one had touched in years. I wasn't there to be praised. I was there to be counted, to show that women like me don't fade. We rise. We build. We remain. Behind me, the ribbon house stood tall and whole, and in front of me sat generations who would never again say yes to invisibility. Not after this. Not after us. When the applause came, it wasn't loud. It was full, weighted, true. Later that night, I walked the length of the field one more time. The air smelled like wildflowers and hope. I tied a final ribbon to the oak tree, deep violet, embroidered with silver thread, for every woman who's ever been told she was too much or not enough. And as the wind lifted it gently into motion, I smiled. Not because I'd found my voice, but because I'd used it. And because I knew now that my story wasn't just heard. It was honored. It would echo long after me in every ribbon that fluttered through the trees. In every woman who whispered me too, then stood a little taller,